Is it recording? Oh, yes, it is. Well, welcome. Welcome to the next one. In this one, I'd like you to set your wayback machines, or maybe open your history books, as we're going back to July of 1980. Because I think trigger warnings are funny, I'll give you three. I will be talking about illegal drugs, underage drinking, and just general 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 teenage debauchery. Um, but let's take a look at July of 1980. Um, the number one hit on the Billboard Top 100 was Funky Town by Lips Incorporated. Um, honestly, not a bad song, and thank goodness it was the ending of disco, for which I'm very grateful. If you'd asked me, I'd have told you that was a mid-70s song and not a 1980s song, but whatever. Um, but also, some of the other songs that came out that were top of the charts in 1980s, I feel like Casey Kasem, were Don't Fall in Love with a Dreamer by Kenny Rogers, because I don't know why. Um, and I think that was a duet, but I couldn't tell you who it was with. Um, Call Me by Blondie. Blondie is actually one of my favorite bands. They did some pretty mainstream stuff and some pretty unusual stuff. I would suggest Europa by Blondie off the album Parallel Lines if you want to listen to one of their more interesting pieces. And on this list, um, by far my favorite song, um, well, at least on this list, was Cars by Gary Newman. He was considered to be a one-hit wonder, but the guy did some real groundbreaking work. Those were all in the top 10. For TV shows, and remember, in 1980, there were only 3 TV stations. The top TV shows in 1980 were Dallas, a nighttime soap opera based in, oddly enough, Dallas, Texas. Who Shot JR, that whole thing. Magnum PI, a weekly private investigator show, um, not unlike the Rockford Files. Well, okay, quite a bit unlike the Rockford Files. Um, Tom Selleck, I think it uh, was the, I don't know what his official job title was, but he worked for this really, really rich dude. And he was just a PI to keep himself entertained. Um, Drove around fancy cars, lived in a big, beautiful house that wasn't his. Doesn't sound like a bad life. Solved crimes, you know. And Facts of Life, which was a spin-off from, what was that show? What you talking about, Willis? That show. What is that show? I can't remember. I met those people. That's an interesting story. It would help if I actually knew the name of the show, though, wouldn't it? Uh, my stepfather took me on a photo shoot one day, on like a Saturday. They were doing a TV guide cover, and he was the assigned photographer. And it was Gary Coleman, Dana Plato. I remember Dana Plato because she was my age, and she was on TV every week. Cute. What can I say? Um, And the other guy who got arrested. Well, Gary Coleman got arrested too. Todd Bridges, yeah, was his name. It's gonna really bug me. What was the name of that show? Oh well. Anyway, Facts of Life was a spin-off, and it was about the housekeeper for Mr. Drummond, who was the rich guy who had these three kids, the Willis, Arnold, and I don't remember the girl's character name. And I guess it doesn't really matter. Anyway, and then the housekeeper, they did a spinoff with her where she was headmistress, I guess, at a girls' boarding school. Really didn't keep my interest as much as you would think it would, but whatever, never mind. In the cinema, or as you heathens call it, the theater. It's movie theaters, right? Cinema is actually the correct term. And there were a couple classics produced right in here. Airplane, the comedy, great movie if you've not seen it. Caddyshack, if you've not seen it, stop this video now, go find it, watch it, and then come back to this video. It's that important. And Dressed to Kill, which was a Brian De Palma murder mystery. I remember this one because I was out with one of my friends. We were watching this movie, and there was one of the high tension scenes, and during this high tension scene, I cracked my neck. She freaked out completely. It was so funny. Historically, because got to get some history in there too. This was the same month that Canada adopted the song "O Canada" as their national anthem, which I guess is important to America's hat. Not so important here. Jimmy Carter was still president of the United States of America, and the legal slavery was abolished in the Islamic Republic of Mauritania. In 1980, there was still legal slavery. Well, I mean, there still is now. Look at China. Never mind. But instead of focusing on July of 1980, I'm going to focus on a very specific date. I am going to focus on Saturday, July 26, 1980. The very day the once Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, I think I said that right, was born. And therefore she was probably far too young and frankly far too far away to attend the first all-day concert I and 75,000 of my close personal friends ever went to. It was at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, and they called it the Summer Blowout. Okay, right. I mean, it may not have been all of their first concerts or all of their first all-day concerts, but it was mine, 3 of my actual friends, because I do like a certain level of anonymity here. I'm going to call them Kenneth, Elsa, and Rose, which are not their actual names, but when I talk about them in the future, those are the names I'm going to use. So what do I mean by all day, right? All day, was that 8 hours? Was that 10 hours? Was that 12 hours? Well, I grew up in a upper middle class white suburb of, as actually in the next county, North Ventura County. And this was, as I mentioned, at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, where it was only safe to be during the day. It was an hour and a half to get there, an hour to get there. So you add in travel time, and this was festival seating. And for those of you who don't know what festival seating was, it was first come, first serve. So the better the seat you wanted, the earlier you got there. Um, then you had to fight 75,000 other people leaving. Normally more than one in a car. We packed 4 into ours. Um, it was literally an all-day experience. We went to the park afterwards and hung out for a while, but it was, it was a long day. Um, so to get the good seats, a place on the actual field instead of the stands, right? You had to get there near the time the gates opened. They opened at 10 a.m. We got there about 9:30. We were a couple hundred people back, which doesn't sound that bad, but there were also a couple hundred gates wide. So, yeah, we got pretty good seats, actually. Um, and keep in mind, at the time, based upon the year of my birth and when this was, I'm pretty sure I was working at BK. I was the broiler guy. There's some stories I can get to. And I was making $3.15 an hour to stand in front of a broiler and put burgers on one end and take them off the other. It was a menial work, but but it was work. So when you factor in taxes, it took about 5 hours on the broiler just to pay for this thing. The ticket prices weren't actually that bad. It was only $12 a ticket for, festival seating, right? So how bad, how good of a seat did you want, depending on how early you got there. I didn't go here for the crowds, obviously. Those of you who know me know I'm not a big fan of crowds. I didn't go so I could drink and use with my friends, because I could do that nearly whenever I wanted. I went for the bands. I went to go see the music. Well, some of the bands. Certainly not all of them. The lineup, well, here it is. Here's the actual lineup. And I did this with some research from the internet, thank goodness. Because I remembered 4 of them, but not all 6. I wonder if I can edit that out or if I should just leave it in. The opening band was a band named Russia. They weren't from Russia. They were from Seattle. They were a 5-piece band. I'm guessing that it was a badly named band based on the current political situation, with Russia actually being the USSR and all still in that whole Cold War thing. I think they were trying to be edgy, and I think they failed. And on YouTube, I could only find one song. I mean, you can go listen to it if you want, but Stand By with the Ear Bleach. It was called Fight Back Time After Time. And it was very poppy, formulaic. Not great, but I mean, good enough to get to the show, right? Even if they were opening. The next band was a band called The Babies. And I remember the name of this band, but I didn't remember any of their songs until I went and, looked them up on YouTube. The 2 songs that I know, and I have to admit, I even liked from this era, were Isn't It Time and Every Time I Think of You. And they're both love ballads. The Babies were a rock love ballad band. So chick music, right? They're not bad listens. I don't think they're going to make anybody's playlists. Then came the first real band, because by the time I was this age, I was, I graduated from AM radio, pop music, to FM, and I had actually by 1980 started transitioning from FM rock and roll. We had KMET and KLOS down there where I was. This concert was brought to you by KMET. I remember that because one of the late night KMET DJs was up there standing up there introducing the new band, and he asks if anybody has a joint, and the whole crowd just goes crazy because this guy was, the big stoner. It was funny. The first real band, the band that got real airplay on the rock stations, was a band called Molly Hatchet. Molly Hatchet could best be described as a southern rock band, right? I'm sure they had a lot more songs, but the one y'all see, because it's a southern rock band, so I get to say y'all. The one y'all might remember is "Flirtin' with Disaster." I did, and honestly, the same way that I like memories from my past, I still do like this song. It's again, not something that's going to make a playlist, not something that I'm going to skip past if it comes up, right? I was listening to it earlier today, and I was reading the comments, and it's a song that deserves to be played loud. It just needs to be. And one of the comments down below said, "I don't listen to Molly Hatchet all the time, but when I do, so do my neighbors." I thought that was very funny. Honestly, though, like most rock and roll bands of that era, they were a little bit too guitar heavy for me. I don't mind if the guitarist wants to show off for 15 or 20 or even 30 seconds, that he can do this neat riff. I'm fine. I get it. That's a skill. Show it off. When you're going into 2.5 minutes of the same fun riff, I've lost interest quite a while ago. So yeah, a bit too guitar heavy. And speaking of guitar heavy, the next band up was Black Sabbath. Now, this was not the Ozzy Osbourne era of Black Sabbath. I think his name was Ronnie James Dio, something like that. I don't know. The guy who took over after Ozzy. This was actually his very first performance as lead singer for Black Sabbath. And I was complaining about Molly Hatchet being too guitar heavy, right? And then I went to Black Sabbath. Obviously, you can tell I'm not a fan of Black Sabbath. I never have been. It's the kind of music Tim listened to. It's the kind of music that he would trap me in his room and put the album on and scream, the side of an album to me, pretend like he was singing, and not understand why I didn't think it was cool. Not a fan, which is, why I went to New Wave. Punk when it came out. Punk first, and then New Wave when it came out. But it wasn't a surprise. I mean, I knew Black Sabbath was going to be there. So I had a plan. And I don't remember who snuck in the booze or how they snuck it in or even what the booze was. But I promise you, booze was involved. So was a lot of pot. And I didn't want to be there for Black Sabbath. So I started drinking heavily when Molly Hatchet came on stage. And by that time, well, the plan was to be completely blacked out, uh, or passed out, I should say, by Black Sabbath. And though I didn't actually hit pass out, which was probably a good thing because it was 110, middle of the day in Los Angeles in the summer. It was the first time I realized I could get drunk enough to jump face first at the ground as hard as I could, as many times as I wanted, and not feel it. I'm not sure if it's a good thing that I learned that or not, but I certainly did. So, you know, the afternoon wasn't nearly as wasted as I was. Let's just put it that way. And also, please factor that in when I tell you that I don't remember the order of the last two bands. I really wish I did, and I suppose I could go look it up someplace, but that I got the band list was enough. I know the last two bands were Journey. Yeah, the famous Journey, but the one with the original singer. I don't suppose it makes any difference. I hear the new singer sounds just like the old singer. But this is when they were on their way up and working real hard. And it was a good show. I'm not a big fan of Journey. It's a little too love ballady for me. It's a little too pop rocky for me. But they put on a hell of a show. And I will give them that. And then the last band was Cheap Trick. And I don't know if any of you have heard of Cheap Trick. But they were definitely, certainly, I mean, if you look at music history, there was rock and roll as shown by, Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and AC/DC, I suppose, was out by that time. And then punk came. And punk came in a couple different forms. You had West Coast punk, you had East Coast punk. You had Iggy Pop, who was the grandfather of punk, maybe. Certainly a groundbreaker. You had British punk, the Sex Pistols. And all of my friends who were into punk really took it quite seriously. And I'm sitting there listening to these punkers, understanding it's all a sarcastic joke, and looking at my friends not understanding why they don't hear the sarcasm in Sid Vicious singing My Way, right? Or the Sex Pistols covering a song from the 60s by the Monkees, or anyway, not that I'm chasing rabbits down a rabbit hole. But after punk came new wave, and that was a lot more synthesizer. Punk was really generally a 3 or 4 piece, bunch of guys playing 3 chords as fast as they could and screaming into the microphones as loud as they could, and being angry. If you want a real good example of East Coast punk, go listen to the band Fear. I guess a good example of West Coast punk would be the Dead Kennedys. And it's just, and I like the Kennedys, don't get me wrong. But it's just a bunch of bands, playing fast and saying as many abusive things as they can. The Dead Kennedys, I will maintain to my dying day are one of the reasons that I have to suffer with political correctness now. Anyway, Cheap Trick was the better band. They didn't dress like rock and rollers. They didn't have suits on, but they did, they didn't have jeans and t-shirts on either. They were, the one guy had the checkerboard suit, a couple of them had, short hair, which for a rock band at the time was incredible. And just it was a good show. And you have to respect any band, honestly, that's gonna go ahead and start lyrics to one of their best songs with the lyrics that Mama told me, yes, she told me I'd meet girls like you. She also told me stay away. You never know what you'll catch. It was a good show. I'm glad I went. It's a very pleasant memory. I have no idea how we got home. Somebody drove. It might have been me. It might have been Kenneth. It certainly wasn't one of the girls. And we hung out at the park until our buzzes all wore off enough that we could actually go home. I've got about 2 minutes left, and I've run out of things to say. I will continue to tell stories about these people, as this was my primary friends group in high school. There were other people that came and went, but these were my primaries. I think I'm gonna fall a little bit short. Looks like it's going to be about a minute and a half of just silence while you watch me screw up my painting. I really should have put tape down and cut it off before I started painting the lettering, but I didn't want to add the time. When I make these videos, I shoot them in real time, obviously, and then speed them up 400 times. So instead of watching me carve a piece of wood for nearly 2 hours, you only have to watch me do it for 28 minutes. Anyway, I think that's all I've got for the night. By now, I've probably screwed up the W on my painting. I probably should have been running the video, so I could have inserted commentary there too. But I don't feel like talking for another half an hour. So I'm just going to wish you all a good evening. And share stories with each other. I mean, since the internet, everything's being recorded, but before the internet, it's all just memories that somebody has. Go fetch them from somebody from before the internet. And that's all I've got. Take care. Stay blessed.